Here's the truth about men forged by pain. You don't advertise it. You don't talk about what you've been through. You don't perform your strength. You don't need people to know how much fire you've survived. So they assume you're average, untested, maybe even weak because you're quiet about it. And then the storm comes. The kind that destroys comfortable people. The kind that exposes who's actually strong and who's been performing strength. And while everyone else is collapsing, you're standing. While they're panicking, you're executing. While they're looking for rescue, you're handling it. And it breaks their entire understanding of you. Because you weren't supposed to be this strong, you weren't supposed to be this capable, you weren't supposed to be unshakable, but you are. Because you were forged by pain they can't imagine. And that forging created something they'll never become unless they go through their own fire. The ascension of man isn't about avoiding pain. It's about being forged by it. It's about sitting in fire until you become something fire can't burn. It's about being broken until you rebuild yourself into something that can't be broken. Most men will never ascend. Not because they're weak, but because they spend their entire lives running from the very thing that would forge them. They avoid pain. They seek comfort. They build lives designed to never be tested. And they stay in their original form. Fragile, breakable, one crisis away from collapse, but you didn't run. You couldn't. Pain found you. And instead of being destroyed by it, you let it forge you. And what emerged is something most men will never become: unshakable. When you've been forged by pain, nothing can shake you. Not because you're invincible, but because you've already survived the worst. You've already been broken. You've already sat in fire, and you're still here, still standing, still moving forward. That's not luck. That's not genetics. That's forging. That's ascension. That's what happens when a man refuses to let pain win. If you've been forged by pain, you don't need to explain it. You don't need to prove it. You don't need anyone to validate it. You just know. Because you've been there, you've sat in fire. You've been broken, you've rebuilt, and nothing can shake you. Because you've already survived everything that tried. Stay unshakable. Stay forged. Let the fire create what it's meant to create. There's a specific kind of man who makes comfortable people nervous. Not because he's aggressive, not because he's loud, but because he's unshakable. And they can't figure out why. They look at him and see calm, composure, control. But what they don't see is the fire that forged him, the pain that shaped him, the breaking that built him. Because a man forged by pain doesn't react like other men. He doesn't break under pressure. He doesn't collapse when things get hard. He doesn't panic when the world falls apart. And to people who've never been through real fire, that looks like something's wrong with him. Like he's cold, detached, emotionally unavailable. But he's not any of those things. He's just operating at a temperature most men will never survive long enough to reach. You know what I'm talking about. Because you've been there. You've sat in fires that would have destroyed other men. And you didn't just survive them. You were transformed by them. Pain didn't break you. It forged you. And now nothing can shake you. Not because you don't feel, but because you've already felt worse. And you're still standing. Let me show you what actually happens when a man is forged by pain. What it costs. What it creates. And why the unshakable man is the most dangerous kind. Most men avoid pain at all costs. They run from discomfort. They medicate anything that hurts. They distract themselves from anything difficult. They've built entire lives around never having to feel the full weight of hard things. And then there's you. You didn't get that option. Pain found you. Not the manageable kind. Not the kind you can avoid or medicate or distract yourself from. The kind that breaks most people. Maybe it was loss that came too early. Maybe it was betrayal from someone you trusted completely. Maybe it was failure so complete it destroyed everything you thought you were. Maybe it was isolation so deep you forgot what connection felt like. Whatever it wasn't optional. It wasn't a challenge you chose. It was fire you were thrown into. And you had two choices: burn, or become something fire can't destroy. You chose the second option. Not because you're stronger than other men, but because something in you refused to let the pain win, refused to let it define you, refused to let it be the end of your story. So you sat in it. You felt every bit of it. You didn't run. You didn't numb. You didn't pretend it wasn't happening. You let it burn through you until there was nothing left to burn. And what remained was something most men will never become: unshakable. Here's what people don't understand about being forged by pain. It's not that you don't feel anymore. It's that you've recalibrated what registers as threatening. Things that would devastate other men barely move you. Not because you're numb, but because you've already survived worse. Rejection? You've been abandoned by people who swore they'd stay. Failure? You've lost everything and rebuilt from nothing. Criticism? You've heard worse from the voice in your own head during the darkest nights. Pressure? You've carried weight that would crush most men, and you're still walking. So when life throws the things that break other men, you don't break. Not because you're invincible, but because you've already been broken and put yourself back together. And the version of you that emerged from that reconstruction is built different. Let me show you what's happening in your brain, because understanding this will show you why you operate the way you do. When you experience severe pain, trauma, or prolonged suffering, your brain doesn't just record it, it adapts. Your amygdala, the threat detection center, it recalibrates. Things that used to trigger fear responses don't anymore. Not because you're suppressing, but because your brain has updated its threat assessment based on what you've already survived. Your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for emotional regulation and executive function, it strengthens, like a muscle under resistance. Every time you sat with unbearable pain without collapsing, you built neural pathways most people never develop. Your hippocampus, the part that processes memory and context, it creates reference points. Every new challenge gets compared to what you've already endured. And when the current pain doesn't match the worst you've survived, your brain doesn't sound the alarm. This isn't suppression. This isn't avoidance. This is adaptation. Your brain has been trained by fire. And now it operates at a temperature most brains will never reach. You've developed what psychologists call stress inoculation. Exposure to severe stress in survivable doses creates resistance to future stress. You're not unaffected by difficulty. You're immunized against being destroyed by it. And that creates a man who can stand in storms that send other men running for shelter. Here's what being forged by pain actually costs. Because we need to be honest about this. It's not free. It's not a gift. It's a trade. And you paid a price most men will never understand. You paid in innocence. You can't see the world the way other people do. You can't believe in fairy tales. You can't trust easily. You can't assume things will work out. Because you've seen how quickly everything can fall apart. You paid in connection. Most people can't relate to you. They haven't been where you've been. They haven't felt what you've felt. They haven't survived what you've survived. So conversations feel shallow. Relationships feel surface. Connection feels rare. You paid in lightness. You can't be carefree. You can't be naive. You can't just enjoy things without being aware of how quickly they can be taken away. There's a weight you carry that never fully lifts. You paid in belonging. You don't fit with people who haven't been through fire. Your perspective is too dark for the optimists. Your realism is too harsh for the dreamers. Your standards are too high for the comfortable. But here's what you gained. And this is what makes the trade worth it. You gained unshakability. Nothing can break you because you've already been broken. Nothing can destroy you because you've already been destroyed. And rebuilt yourself, you gained clarity. You see things as they are, not as you wish they were. You don't waste time on delusions. You don't invest in fantasies. You operate in reality. And reality, however harsh, is where actual power lives. You gained strength that can't be taught, can't be faked, can't be performed. The kind that only comes from sitting in fire and refusing to burn, from being broken and choosing to rebuild, from losing everything and deciding that means you have nothing left to lose. You gained freedom from fear, not because you're not afraid, but because you've already faced the worst and survived. So what's left to be afraid of? More pain? You've handled worse. More loss? You've rebuilt from less. More pressure? You've carried heavier. Most men spend their entire lives afraid of the fire, avoiding pain, running from discomfort, building lives designed to never be tested. And then they wonder why they feel weak, why they feel fragile, why they feel like they're one crisis away from collapse. It's because they are. They've never been forged. They're still in their original form, untested, unproven, unsure if they can actually handle what life can throw at them. But, you've been tested, you've been proven, you've been through fire, and what emerged is something fire can't destroy. Here's what separates forged men from everyone else. When crisis hits, when pressure mounts, when everything falls apart, most men collapse. They panic, they freeze, they look for someone to save them. They fall apart because they've never been broken before and they don't know they can survive. But you've been here before. Maybe not this exact situation, but you've been in the fire. You know what it feels like. You know it's survivable. You know you can sit in hell and walk out when it's done. So while everyone else is falling apart, you're calm. Not because you don't feel the pressure, but because pressure doesn't scare you anymore. You've been under worse, and you're still here. That calm, that composure, that unshakable quality, it's not natural. It's not a personality trait.